So tonight we're going to be in chapter 4. This is one of those I've got some good news, bad news sorts of deals. Good news is we're making progress. We're in chapter 4. The bad news is there's no way we're going to get through chapter 4 in one night. So I'm going to have to carry it. I will continue it next week. And then we may get halfway through. I may finish halfway through next week, and we'll turn it over to Jordan to pick up on chapter 5. But anyways, we're not on any particular timeline here where we have to do something on any particular timeline. We'll take it as we need to. Some chapters we can get through fast. Some chapters it's just going to take a little bit more time to get through. So, anyways, I've got a couple of videos I'm going to start off with. Short videos. One of them's about 3 minutes. One of them's 4 minutes, I think. But the first one I'm going to show you is a video of a person by the name of Greg Kokel. He has a ministry called Stand to Reason. And he's going to talk about this idea that we've mentioned in here about gardening. You know, we talk about sowing and gardening and harvesting and, you know, using these farming motifs as sort of like analogies and parables and illustrations. He's going to talk about that a little bit. It'll help us all understand what we mean by this sort of thing. And then the second video is going to talk about, it's a pastor in North Carolina. He's going to talk about pre-evangelism. So these videos are just kind of reinforce what we've already covered. I've got another video as well that's going to cover chapter 4, but the first two videos are just to discuss some things that we've already talked about in here, but it's to reinforce it with us. Repetition is a good teacher, so we'll kind of repeat a few things in here over and over again. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and pull up and we'll get through these two videos, then we'll go ahead and start in on chapter 4. So we may have to adjust the volume. I don't know how loud the volume's going to be on the TV, Jordan.
Confidence for every Christian. Safety for every challenge. And grace for every encounter. I had somewhat of an epiphany 10, 15 years ago. Something came together for me that has really profoundly influenced
is it up here?
the way that I approach the whole task that we generally call evangelism. Before there can be a harvest, there has to be a season of gardening. And what this points out for evangelism is that before someone comes to Christ, there is a season of that person considering Christ. And nowadays, that season is a whole lot longer than it used to be. In other words, as Francis Schaeffer used to put it, we need more pre-evangelism than we ever needed. So if we just go out into the field and we are looking for a harvest, and our evangelism technique is focusing on getting people to sign on the dotted line to close the deal, so to speak, we may be really frustrated because it's like harvesting fruit that's not ripe yet. And I began to think of my own life, and I realized that I'm not really a harvester. I'm a gardener. Everything that I do, really, on the radio and writing books and talking to audiences, is mostly gardening, not harvesting. Is there a harvest? Sure, I get people that come to me, and they tell me that they've listened to the show or read the books, and eventually they became a Christian, right? In other words, somebody went into my garden, where I've been gardening, and harvested my fruit. Do you think that bothers me? No, it doesn't bother me. I'm glad for that. And Jesus said the same thing in John chapter 4, right after the woman at the well. The disciples came up to him after she had gone up to Sychar, and he says to the disciples, you are about to reap where you did not sow. In other words, he's identifying one field, 2 seasons, reaping and sowing, and 2 kinds of workers, reapers and sowers, harvesters and gardeners. And I think the gardening job is the one that's the hardest to do, because when the fruit is ripe, it falls into the basket. What Jesus is telling the disciples is they're about to get the ripe, low-hanging fruit, though someone else did the heavy lifting. And then he says, so that the one who reaps and the one who sows can rejoice together. That's my approach. That's what I mean when I say I just want to put a stone in someone's shoe. When I go to engage other people, I'm not looking to lead them to Christ. I'm not looking to close the deal. I'm not swinging for the fences. I'm just trying to make a small difference in their life, put a stone in their shoe, get them thinking about something important about Christ, maybe create a doubt in their mind about their own view, so that would move them a little bit closer. And I think if more Christians thought of themselves as gardeners and not worried about the harvest, which I think is going to take care of itself by God's sovereignty, we get out there and start gardening, doing a little here, a little there, more Christians would get off the bench and get into play. And this is part of the reason I have the tactical game plan, because tactics is a game plan that will allow you to do that effectively. Tactics helps you to garden. And gardening, I think, is the biggest thing that's needed right now.
Okay, so I've got one more. It's a pastor in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's going to talk about pre-evangelism. I thought you had the remote earlier, or I would have turned it down.
I'll give you one example of an anecdote from recently. There was, I think this was in Chicago, but a believer had a cross around their neck. And one would assume everybody knows what the cross is about. And she asked, well, why do you wear a plus sign around your neck? There are so many wrong assumptions, and sometimes from educated people. We assume that educated people know certain things about the Christian gospel, and that they just don't. What is a parable? You know, sometimes you can teach a parable and never explain what a parable is. Why do we even sing in worship? You know, it's the why questions underneath. I think what happens in preaching, especially, is if you tend to talk in a sermon to the people you've talked to all week long. It's just a natural default, I think. And that's why I tell guys in seminary, your worst sermons are going to be when you're in seminary, because all you're talking about are insider conversations. You need to go coach Little League, you need to join a bowling alley, you need to do something, you know, you need to hang out where the kids are smoking the e-cigs in high school and talk to real people, and that you'll see an effect of how you begin to apply the text. So pre-evangelism is just having the general conversations about all the assumptions that we make in the ministry. Youth camps have helped me do this a lot. The kids never been to youth camp, never been to a church, or maybe a handful of times. So little things like giving the grand story of the Bible. I just think that's so important. Not just because it's the cool thing and all the legends are doing it, but like it's absolutely essential for people to know how what you're talking about fits like Creator. You can't assume that. I think it's Dave Carson that says that when we used to evangelize atheists, they were a particular kind of atheist. They were an atheist who were denying the existence of the Christian God. And the present atheist is not necessarily angry at the Christian God, though I think that's normally the case. But the assumptions we've got to go underneath and to prepare for biblical cluelessness when we're preparing, assume different worldviews, and you've got to be Captain Obvious sometimes and explain terms and be obvious. Again, I don't think you have to be shallow in your preaching. I don't think you have to give any of that up. I think you can, and I think most believers today, I speak to a lot of millennials, they don't have any problem with you teaching the Bible. Like they come to church expecting it, and they actually think they're interested. Most unbelievers that I meet that are millennials, they're not upset when we share our faith with them. I think they're more surprised that we don't, if we believe it. But what we have to do is explain all of the things we assume people know that they just don't. And that's not just in non-Bible Belt settings. I mean, that's in the Bible Belt as well. And so a lot of people have just hid. They haven't asked questions growing up. They may be great, but they don't have framework. So we got to help them with that.
Okay. So again, I just want to show some clips from time to time that just reinforce some of the principles and thoughts that we've been discussing in here, because this entire part one of the book is about pre-evangelism, right? It's about gardening. It's about working with people, particularly those that are furthest away from God. And now we're living in a country where people are further and further. Each generation that comes along is a little bit further away from God than the previous one. And as the gentleman was saying here in the video, you can't assume people, even educated people, you can't assume that they know basic things. I found it kind of shocking about somebody wearing a Christian cross and being asked why you wear a plus sign, that stuff like that. But that's the world that we're living in now, is that you can't take for granted, you can't assume. So when you're talking to people and talking to somebody about spiritual matters, you're going to have to spell it out. If you use a term, you're going to have to spell it out. You can't ask somebody if they're saved. They don't even understand. Some of them, most of them, many of them don't understand what that term means, especially once you get outside of the South. So this is just to kind of reiterate and reinforce some of those things. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything about any of the material from any of the previous sessions that we've covered up until now? Anything at all? Okay, well, let's jump into chapter 4. The title of the chapter is Moving Toward a Theistic Worldview, right? Okay, so we're going to get into worldview. I'm not going to assume you know anything about what a theistic worldview is. So I'm going to really give you a lot more detail than what's in the book. I've got some PowerPoint slides. This stuff that we're talking about is very abstract, so I'm going to try to use some pictures and graphics just to help you understand this stuff a little bit better. It helps me understand things. And so when we're talking about a theistic worldview, there are three main religions that would fall under this heading as theism or theistic worldview. Christianity. What would be the other two? That would be considered theistic. Judaism would be one. Another one, two. Islam. Yeah. So, what does Christianity, Islam, and Judaism have in common? What do you think they all have in common that they would fall under this?
One God.
Okay, they believe that there is one and only one true God that exists. Okay, excellent. Anything else? What else about this one true God?
He's the creator.
He's the creator, yeah. He is the self-existent one who has always existed, that's responsible for creating everything else that exists. I'm going to say a word here, and this is going to be important. We're going to talk about transcendence. Our God is transcendent. So our God, a theistic God, is outside, his essence is outside of the universe, not within the universe. But a theistic God acts within the universe, does stuff, interacts within the universe. That's what distinguishes theism from deism. Okay, deism is monotheistic, but God creates stuff and then his hands backs away and lets it go its own way. So we're going to get to that, but we don't there's a lot of differences, right? Also between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. You know, you don't want to just be in the same car with those other guys because there's a lot of differences that we have with them. So to further distinguish us, yeah, we're all theists, have a theistic God, but when you move to Christianity, what we call a Christian worldview and a biblical worldview, that's where we start to distinguish ourselves between Islam and Judaism. So, as we move forward there's three things to understand in a theistic worldview. This is not real complicated. I've tried to simplify this as best as I can. A theistic worldview, to explain it or defend it, there are only three things, really. Truth exists, objective truth exists. We're going to talk about that. We all theists acknowledge, or theistic worldview people acknowledge that objective truth exists, and I'm going to talk and explain what that means and how to defend it. It's rather easy to defend. We'll get into that tonight. Number two, from there, God exists. Theistic God exists. Not any God, but a theistic God, which we already talked about. Transcendent, one, acts within the creation, all of that. So truth exists. Number two, God exists. A theistic God exists. And the third one is God acts, or another way of looking at it is miracles are possible. So truth exists, God acts. Now when we get to the next chapter where we're dealing with the distinctives of Christianity, Jordan will be getting into that. We're going to add one more item to those three, and that is the New Testament is reliable, basically, or you'd say God speaks. So truth exists, God acts, and then when you start looking at Christianity separately, you're looking at number four is God speaks. And there we have the Old and New Testament of the Bible. So those are the distinctives. So the first three items, as far as being able to prove truth exists, God exists, theistic God exists, and God acts, or God can do miracles, proving and demonstrating those three things, it's actually not that difficult because you don't even have to use the Bible. I don't use the Bible when I'm proving those three things or demonstrating those three things to be true, but you do use the Bible when you get to number four. You have to. That's because that's the distinctive of Christianity, right? We're people of the book, the Old and the New Testament, that God speaks to us, that God revealed Himself to us and revealed His Son to us in Jesus Christ. And that is the special revelation that we will get into when we deal with chapter 5 on Christian worldview. So how do we kind of demonstrate that truth exists, God exists, and that God can act, God can do miracles? Well, we're going to use what we call natural theology. Natural theology is something that is available everywhere to everyone because that's nature. You look at nature, our human nature, where we take human experience and then we use human reason to deduce those experiences and draw inferences to conclusions, and that's how we can prove, if we need to prove it, those three things. Now, we start off in this chapter by saying, hey, we're starting to get into some kind of deep material here. You know, don't feel overwhelmed because chapter 4 and chapter 5 are going to be pretty deep. We're going to get into a lot of stuff in these chapters that may be new to a lot of people. But there's two things that when you're doing pre-evangelism or evangelism or talking to anybody about Christ, there are two things we need to be prepared for, but often only one is needed often, okay? So first of all, as we talk about, I think there in 49, people are always going to need to know basic definitions and explanations for what Christianity and the Christian worldview is, okay? They're going to need a proper to hear a proper articulation, an accurate articulation of what Christianity, Christian worldview is. Okay, now some people not only want to hear it and understand it and say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but then they want to ask you, now why do you think truth exists, or why do you believe God exists? And so then you're going to have to, if they ask that, not everybody asks that question, but every once in a while, you know, if you have an adult, maybe they're a college-educated adult and they didn't grow up in church and they don't know a whole lot about Christianity, but a lot of times they're going to ask these how and why questions of, well, how do you know that's true, you know? And so we know that it takes a while to learn how to defend Christianity. It takes a while. So what I say is, or you know, my recommendation or my advice is just learn how to just explain it first. Just to explain the Christian worldview, what it is. Then you could because everybody needs to hear that. But then in the meantime, or in your spare time, then start learning how to defend those things. But in the meantime, if you're talking to somebody, say you're talking to somebody at work, and they want to know why we believe truth exists, God exists, because they're holding a different worldview, and you're not ready, you haven't prepared yet enough to defend that, to be able to say why we believe all that is true, then you need to know who you can refer them to, you know, whether it's somebody at work, whether it's an Anna Kitko or Jordan or me or Bill or Justin or anybody you can think of that knows a little bit more. You know, you need to know who you can refer them to until you're ready yourself, studied up enough to where you can talk them through those things. And Jordan has an excellent pamphlet that we often keep out on the tables sometimes that says, why do you exist? Is that the title of it? Yeah, why do you exist? And it covers a lot of this stuff. So always keep one of those in your drawer or in your Bible or in your car or glove box or something like that. Because if you have somebody that's sort of asking those questions and they're sincere about it, then that would be a good reference material to give them. So tonight, we're going to talk about the first three things that involve what we call a theistic worldview. Truth exists, God exists, and God acts. Or when we say that, we mean miracles are possible. So let's go over here to defining worldview. On page 51. I'll just pull up the definition here. We've already mentioned this, we've talked about this, but I know this is kind of a new concept for some of you, so we'll just keep repeating it as many times as we need to. But a worldview is a composition of foundational beliefs through which a person views and interprets reality. Okay? What's really real? Okay? Are angels really real? Do they really exist? What about the human soul? Is it really real? Does it really exist? Okay? These sorts of things. So your worldview is those basic core beliefs that help us all understand and interpret reality. So that's how I define worldview. There's different definitions out there. Now everybody has a worldview. I'm getting ready to show a video clip of several people talking about worldview because I want us all to just to understand it. I'm not asking us to be experts. We don't have to be experts. But a worldview, that's your foundational core beliefs that when you start thinking about, does God exist? You know, do angels exist? Is the Bible an acceptable source of knowledge? You know, where do human beings come from? Where do they go after death? When you start asking these big questions in life, that's what we're doing. We're accessing our worldview. And people have different worldviews, as we well know, and it leads to a lot of different beliefs. So, as I'm going to show you this video, it's only about 3 or 4 minutes long. I want to apologize in advance. A couple of parts of it are chopped up. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you why. I'm disappointed I had to cut out Ravi Zacharias was in it, so I've had to go in there and cut him out of it. But he had some really good stuff to say. But unfortunately, you know, even though what he said was true, people aren't going to be thinking about what he said. They're going to be thinking about what he did. So I've had to cut him out, and you'll see it's not real smooth transition in a couple of places. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and play our little video. It's just going to help us understand this whole thing about worldview. Okay? Make sure I've got the, what did I do? Yeah, there's the remote in case I need to adjust the volume here. Okay, here we go.
My worldview is the beliefs that I build my life on. It's how I view everything in life. It's how I view God. It's how I view Satan. It's how I view myself. It's how I view other people. My worldview includes my thoughts about life, about death, about the past, the present, the future. Your worldview includes what you feel about pain and about suffering and about problems and about good and about evil. Your worldview includes what you think about time, about money. Everything you think about life is included in what we call the worldview.
Worldview, as the word suggests, is how we look at the world around us.
Worldview is a set of basic assumptions that help you make sense about reality. A worldview is like a lens through which you see things, and you're not really aware of the lens, you're only aware of the things you see.
So it becomes the glasses, the spectacles, the filter through which they're actually seeing life. And the whole universe and the world and human life is understood through that lens.
Our thinking really does govern the way we act, the choices we make.
There are ideas that have consequences. And our culture is shaped, first of all, by distorted ideas that yield distorted lives.
And when we do not understand or know the true claims of God, we take the true claims of the world as if they're true. When we live according to the lies and the delusions of the world, then we suffer deeply.
God wants us to see the world the way He told us it is. Everything begins with an infinite personal God, and the whole universe and the world and human life is understood through that lens.
Okay, so that's sort of an introduction of people talking about this whole concept about worldview. You heard them talk about glasses. So when we think about worldview, an analogy to think of is eyeglasses. When I'm wearing eyeglasses, when I'm walking and talking and reading, I'm looking at like this paper. I'm not even conscious that my glasses are even on me, you know, except for right now that I'm talking about it. So, and that's what it is. So that's kind of the way it is with worldview. It's going to focus and affect what you're looking at. It's kind of like a filter of a way of understanding reality as we go through life and we experience different things. So if you have a worldview with rose-tinted glasses, you know, you're going to see everything with a rose tint. If you have it with a different color, you're going to see everything in that different color. Another example that's often used is that a worldview is a lot like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, the entire puzzle put together is your worldview, and then the sort of the individual smaller pieces comprise those beliefs that form your worldview. So there's basically, we're going to talk about those core beliefs, right? If a worldview is the core beliefs through which one views and interprets reality, what kind of core beliefs are we talking about? And these eyeglasses up here, we're going to use as our analogy and our illustration is we got 5 categories of beliefs that everybody has, whether you think about it or not. Everybody's got beliefs that fit into these categories, and all 5 of them together are going to form the lens of your worldview glasses. So, and this is what's also in the book, I think, as we go into 51, into page 52. So where it says world ontology up there, that's at the top of page 52, beliefs about the external world. Okay, we'll look at that. So when we talk about the external world, that's known in intellectual circles or in academia as ontology or sometimes metaphysics. What is real? What really exists? Is there an external reality out here? Then you have beliefs about God that we call theology. Then everybody has beliefs about knowledge, or what's an acceptable source of knowledge. That's called epistemology. And then we have ethics, our beliefs about right and wrong, morality. That's study of values is called axiology. And then mankind. What is man? So, you know, we looked at, if you look at page 52 there, I think if I flip it over here, yeah. So these, when you're looking at the world, or growing up, and we start forming beliefs about the external world around us, what is real, you know, these are the kind of questions that we're trying to solidify in our brains and in our thoughts. Is, you know, is there something as opposed to nothing? Well, we're going to say yes, but you'd be surprised. There are people out there that think they're the only thing that exists, not other than babies. They're called solipsists. But there's a lot of strange views out there on this. But if there is a reality outside of our mind, you know, why is it there? How did it get there? And then, you know, what's the nature of the universe or reality? In other words, is it just sort of physical, or is it spiritual or physical? What's it composed of? So these are the kind of beliefs and questions that we start looking at. Here's some beliefs we try to resolve when it comes to our views and beliefs about God. First of all, is there a God? And then if we say yes, then we say, okay, who or what is that God or gods? How many are there? And what is that God's relationship to the universe? And then you have beliefs about knowledge. that deals also with the nature of truth. Can truth be known and knowledge really be attained? Can you know it with certainty, or do we always have to be doubting? We can't have any certainty. And what are acceptable sources of knowledge? A big one for us there is something called special revelation. We would say special revelation from God is an acceptable source of knowledge. A lot of people don't accept that as a valid source of knowledge. And so we have ethics or morals. You know, do moral laws exist? Are they objective or are they subjective? Or, you know, where do they come from? What's the basis for them? Do they apply equally to all people, or just some people in some places at some times? So these are all the questions that go into us forming our beliefs about these sorts of things. Humans, when we're looking at our beliefs about human beings or humanity in general, what's the nature or essence of being a man, mankind, human being? Do we have free will, or are we determined? Are we essentially good? Are we born good, essentially good, evil, or neutral? But these are all sorts of things that people are going to disagree about, especially people that have different worldviews. What about humans? Let's take this for an example. What are some views about humanity that's different from Christianity, the way people might view human beings, especially maybe where do human beings come from? Where did we originate? Where do we go after death? Things like that even. Do human beings have a soul? Does everybody, even atheists, do atheists think human beings have a soul? Or not? No, they don't. that would go pretty hard against their worldview, which we'll get into, of materialism or naturalism, of what sort of things they think exist.
Well, witnesses teach that dogs have the same type of soul we have.
Yeah, they do. They teach that, and they teach soul sleep, sort of a thing. Yeah, that's right. So, as you can see, everybody growing up starts developing and solidifying their beliefs in these different areas, and the human mind, and I'll just say it, God made us as such that, we want to be consistent. So what we believe in one category is going to affect what you believe in other categories, right? So what you believe about God will directly influence what you believe about man. So, right? And so we're going to try to be consistent. We don't like that tension of believing things that are kind of contradictory. Okay, it causes tension within us. We don't like that, and I believe God made us like that to be reasonable beings made in His image. But for example, if somebody's an atheist, but yet they believe in the existence of a soul, or even say an angel, that's going to there's a clash there. Those things don't mesh. They're kind of contradictory, which we can get into later. But so we tend to do that. Some human beings do hold contradictory beliefs. They just sort of hold it in tension and try not to think about it. But most people try to get all their beliefs to be consistent with each other in all of these different categories. So it's basically all that. So, right. So once we form our worldview, our beliefs about the world, our beliefs about God, our beliefs about humanity, our beliefs about values, our beliefs about knowledge, we're going to start answering the big questions in life. And our worldview is now going to help us to answer life's big, most important questions, such as, I call this OIMD, or because of the OIMD of each word there, kind of an acrostic. But yeah, life's big questions, origins. Where do we come from? Where do we go? Who or what are we as human beings? Why are we here? Does my existence matter? Right? How should we live? Is there real absolute right and wrongs out here that apply to everybody? Destiny. Where do we go after death? These are a lot of life's big questions that everybody's going to have to entertain. If you live beyond, the age of 5 or 6, you're going to start contemplating these things, and at some point you're going to get solidified. That's why it's important. I think children's ministry is so important, because they are forming, whether we realize it or not, they're forming a worldview. What's plausible? What's reality like? Does God fit into this? Is God really real? And if He is, what's the implications? And how does that affect my other beliefs? So they're forming these things, and plausibility, is it plausibly true? And so the older a person gets, and they have no exposure to Christianity, they have no exposure to our worldview and why we hold to our worldview, and they become an adult. Well, they're going to be way at the end of that scale. They're going to be hard. It's going to, God can save them, and God saves all sorts of people, but they're going to be on the far end of that scale. There's going to be a lot more farming and pre-evangelism and gardening with somebody like that than, say, somebody that grew up in the church but just never accepted Christ. Probably, because they're going to understand things and maybe even be more accepting of certain things. So, want to look now. We only got a few minutes left, so we're going to try to get into this just a little bit. Does anybody have any questions? I know this is sort of can be some heavy stuff to think about. Does anybody have any questions on anything right now, or need clarification on right now? I'm going to try to keep it, on a pretty basic level here, but I need to go into enough depth needed so that we also have a handle on worldviews and understanding of worldviews. So now I'm on page 54. We're going to look at what all this graphic chart stuff looks like. Let's see here. Yeah. So this is how this figure 1 says categorizing the major worldviews on page 54. This is how this little flow chart works. You start by asking the question, and this is what people do that already have a worldview. You look at, is there an external reality outside of my mind that really exists? There are some people that think we live in a matrix. You all saw in the movie The Matrix? Okay, there are some people that really believe that this is a computer simulation that we're living in. They sincerely believe it. There's not a whole lot of them. Most of them are probably faking it, just saying it to get people excited and disturbed. But there are some people that say, no, reality doesn't exist. This is all a computer simulation. It appears to be real, but it's not. It's like The Matrix. It's like the movie The Matrix. So, but basically this is, we start, is there an external reality? Can we know what it is? There are people that say, with a worldview, that say, well, yeah, there's an external reality, but we just can't know what it is, or we just don't know with much certainty. And we call these people postmoderns. They don't believe, I'm not saying that they're matrix people, they're not. But a postmodern person just says you can't know things with certainty, no matter what the question is. They're going to say, well, you just can't know it, or you can't know it with much certainty. Yeah, there's something real out there, but we can't be real specific about what it is. Those people are postmodernists, okay? But actually, I think most people are not postmodernists, because that's something that's really hard to live out. We'll talk about it a little bit more next week. So our next question is, okay, there are people that say reality is knowable. You can know a lot about the external reality around us. So the question is, what is the fundamental nature of the reality around us? Is it physical? Is it purely spiritual? Or is it both? And there are people in all three of those camps, okay? They say reality is purely physical, purely material. It's just atoms and matter and energy, time, space, matter. That's all there is. It's just purely physical, okay? And that's where you get naturalism or materialism. And then there are some people that say it's purely spiritual. It's all spiritual. That the reality is not material. They just say that's an illusion. And so those are, we can get into pantheistic monism. So Hindus and Buddhists would fit into that camp, pantheistic monism. And then you got people that say, no, reality, we can know something about it, but it's both physical and spiritual. It contains both sorts of things. So for that group, we have to ask another question. If you say it's both physical and spiritual, then you have to ask the question, okay, and I kind of skipped over a couple of things here, but basically this is where it hits the road. Do you believe in one personal God that's transcendent, or do you believe in multiple gods or multiple spirit beings? They're all within inside the universe. Okay, that's going to be the dividing line with this group of physical and spiritual. So, some people say, yeah, there's multiple spirit beings or multiple gods. They're all immanent. Immanent means within the universe. Transcendent means outside the universe. And so if you think there are multiple spirit beings, multiple gods, everything's inside the universe, then you're going to be a polytheist. And if you think that, no, there's one personal God and that God's transcendent, you're going to be a theist. So these are the five, that's it. That's basically, this is going to cover probably 98% of the world here. There are people that are outliers that really don't fit neatly into any of this stuff, but 98% of the people in the world are going to fit into one of these five categories. So you don't have to learn every religion in the world if you kind of know what their worldview is. You know, if their religion places them inside that worldview, you already know a lot about what's going on. So we'll give you an example. So theism, as we talked about, is Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. It's all under the bottom there. And polytheism would be Mormonism, animism, Shinto. Shinto is an ancient Japanese religion. Animism is in parts of Africa, Native Americans, shamanism, that's animism. These tribes, like these unreached people groups out in the Pacific Islands or in Papua New Guinea, those are more polytheistic, animistic type groups. The Pantheistic Monism, that's Hinduism, Buddhism, New Age type beliefs. And then under Naturalism, you got atheism, humanism, I got skepticism, materialism, all sorts of things under that. That's the only thing, you know, 5 categories is all you have to really keep in mind. It covers 98% of the people on the earth. So that's why I broke it into these 5 major worldviews. Different people categorize it differently, but I just found this to be a simple way to understand worldviews, a simple way to understand how people think and function and operate. Now, I'm not going to go into every bit of detail about these different groups. I am going to talk about theism and just touch on the others. We're about out of time here. So remember, theism is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So we're all under this umbrella of theism, a theistic worldview. Does anybody remember the 3 major tenets of theism that I mentioned earlier tonight? Something exists, something exists.
Objective truth. Go ahead.
Okay, David, go ahead.
Objective truth exists, God exists, and God acts, and miracles are possible.
Yeah, okay, so those are the 3 things. So objective truth exists, and when I say God exists, we do mean a theistic God exists, and miracles are possible, which says God acts. So theism, so a worldview that believes in eternal, transcendent God. What's transcendent mean in this context here? What do we mean by transcendent in this context here?
Above us.
He's above and beyond us, right? Yeah. God's essence is outside of the universe. God acts within the universe. He manifests himself inside the universe, but his essence is outside the universe. So, a transcendent God freely created all of existence, time, space, matter, celestial realms, and beings out of nothing. The Christian term is ex nihilo. That's a Latin term. It means out of nothing. And that he continues to act within the creation in varying degrees. So, that gives you Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And again, we're going to break it down further to go beyond theism to Christian theism when Jordan takes us into chapter 5. And that's where you get into the New Testament, that not only God acts, but God speaks. And so we're people of the book. So let me see here. I'm going to finish with this last slide or 2 here. So this is a graphic representation of what our worldview looks like as far as theism. So we're under this big umbrella called theism, and we're under a smaller umbrella under that called Christian theism. But under the big, large umbrella right now of theism, everybody that's a theist believes that, let's say, you go back before the book of Genesis, before time began, all that existed is God. Ontos just means God's essence and being. So God is existing in timeless eternity. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Trinity is existing. That's all that exists. Okay? We can understand that. Then God decides and creates. Okay? And that's where we get this arch. So God's essence is still outside of creation, but everything that's considered created is under the arch. Let me just put it this way. We can't get above the arch. That would be to become God. We can't become God, right? So there's always going to be that barrier, what's called the arch. It's the barrier. That's God's essence out there. And if God's essence were to come inside the arch, okay, that would not be good either, because we're sinful creatures. And everything would probably be incinerated. So His essence is on the outside, above and beyond creation, but yet God is also immanent. Immanence means God acts within the creation. He manifests himself inside the creation. He is involved with what's here that he created. He's involved with it. And it includes everything. So heaven, the new heavens and the new earth, angels, man, everything that's created, and that includes heaven. Heaven is a created place as well. Everything that's created is below that arch. So that's sort of how we view things from a theistic worldview. So Christians believe this. Jews, believing Jews, a lot of Jews are atheists, but believing Jews would hold to this, and most Muslims would hold to this kind of view of God and the created order. So that's how I'm not going to go into that. So that's how the created order is in relationship to God. These things are so, theological and abstract. It's hard to understand them a lot. That's why I try to use a little bit of graphic images to help us wrap our brains around some of this stuff. Because when you're dealing with a transcendent God, it's hard to think about that, right? An infinite God that has always existed. He never began to exist. He just has always existed. It's really hard to think about stuff like that and wrap our brains around it. Yeah, we believe it. But so anyways, this just sort of helps us to get our brain around what theists believe. Now, I think I am going to go, if you can bear with me for just 1 minute, I'm going to flip through what other worldviews believe. Let me get this. Okay. This is another graphic way to look at worldviews, and I'm going to show you all the worldviews real quickly. So, again, we have the arch. What's the arch represent? What do y'all think? What does that arch represent? Transcendence, yeah. The only thing above that arch is God's essence. Anything that's not part of God's essence is created, and it's under the arch. So, we are theists. We believe that there's physical things that exist and spiritual things that exist. Some of them together, we have a spiritual soul that's connected to a physical body even. So we believe in all this stuff, and we believe that there is a separation between God and the physical creation. There is a difference here. Now, look at this worldview. This worldview says there are many spiritual beings or gods, and everything is just within the universe or within the created order. What sort of worldview do you think this might represent? They say they're both physical. There is physical realities. There are spiritual realities. There's one or more gods, or spirit beings, however you want to call it, but everything is sort of within the created order. There's nothing outside of the created order. There's nothing outside there like a transcendent God. This would be,
like paganistic.
Yeah, this would be like paganism, polytheism, animism. Mormonism, though, falls into this. This is a worldview of Mormonism.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, this one right here says the only thing that exists is spiritual. The physical things don't exist. They're just illusions. there's just one reality, and it's all spiritual, and that's our goal, is to get back to this spiritual, get absorbed into this one thing they call the spirit, or the one, or the real, or the God. This is, what do you think this could be? What?
Naturalism?
Not naturalism. Naturalism is more of as an atheistic worldview. Huh?
Like the Hindus and the...
Yeah, this is the Hindus and Buddhists, so it's Pantheistic Monism. If you believe, now some of them believe that they'll call it God, the one impersonal God, not a personal God, impersonal. Like a force, like in Star Wars, this force, it's impersonal. Those that call that impersonal force God, that would be called pantheists, that everything is a part of God. Okay, we're God, you're God, this is God, that's God, everything's God. So, Shirley MacLaine kind of stuff. Okay. And so, Ellen, this is what you were referring to, though. The only thing that exists is, it's just physical. There is no spiritual and material reality. It's just matter. Time, space, and matter is all that exists. That's all there is. Okay, so this would be the worldview of naturalism. So that's basically what they adhere to. So, and this is postmodernism. Oh, you just can't know. You just can't know. You just can't know with certainty. So that concludes that. So we're going to finish this up next week. I don't know how much time I will need next week, but we are going to. But next week we do need to talk. I may take the whole class time, but we're going to talk about those three things, those three tenets of theism, what they are, and how we can demonstrate to people that they're true. What are those three tenets of theism? Exist, and what exists? Truth exists, God exists, and God acts, which means miracles are possible. Okay? We're going to cover those three things next week. Any questions, comments? Okay.
This stuff seems real theoretical, and but man, this is, when you turn on your TV, you're seeing this.
Yep.
Every single day, inside this room, outside. I mean, this is dominating everything right now. You look at things and scratch your head and say, why is it that way? This is why it's that way. And it's really important to get these concepts, because this determines everything that's happening right now.
Yeah. I could play you video clips all day long where I've stored up video clips that some of my other classes I used to teach, that I play them in. It's news reports and things like that. And it will have people it was a holiday. It was a news report on Christmas. And this guy is somewhere out, I think in Seattle, Washington, and he's out here ringing a bell, and he's saying, hey, there's no such things as gods and angels and souls. The only thing out here is the earth and science and time, space, and matter. He's out here saying that. So it's like, he's ringing the bell for natural. That's a naturalistic worldview, you couldn't have put it any plainer. And so people are all the time doing stuff like that. I wish I could. I'm not going to show you video clips and stuff, but we will cover truth exists, God acts next week, and then we'll turn it over to chapter 5. So if you're finding this stuff to be difficult, I understand. All I can say is take some no-dos next week. So I apologize. Does anybody have any parting shots for me or comments or anything?